on Highway 27, headed north from Buchanan to Cedartown. And I've gotten lucky on the weather. It was forecast to be raining up until this morning when they changed it the last minute, and I actually have a little bit of sun back over my shoulder peeking out from time to time through these little wispy clouds, so hopefully I'm going to be okay. I did have to wait until the afternoon to get going though because of some rain that was actually falling at the house right before I left. Just a little sprinkle. But anyway, thought I'd tell you about my most infamous moment at my old job. I worked for 35 years for a tractor dealership, and I worked in their parts department as a commissioned salesman. I also was the assistant manager for a number of years. Worked with a great guy, my boss, who's almost exactly 10 years older than me. And we always seem to get along real well. He was a great boss. He was the kind of boss that takes all the heat for his department. He doesn't come back. He doesn't go take a chewing, get called up on the carpet, as we say. He doesn't get a chewing and then come back and chew everybody else out. He took it, and he would come back, and then he would just ask us for, ask us to give him some help to try to keep the bosses off his back, to try to do this or do that or whatever. Now, he eventually retired. Now, we had as many as 5 people in that department at one time. Right before he retired, we were down to 3 people. I pretty much had to handle the front counter all by myself. We had one fella who handled our shop counter, plus did all the shipping and receiving and inventorying and all that had to be done. And the boss, my boss, took care of all the ordering, all the paperwork, all the entering on the computer, did everything else. Now, when I would get in a bind up front, somebody would stop and come help me. Of course, the phones would ring all the time. We had at that time 8 phone lines that came into our department. So if I'm with somebody, one of the other guys with the mechanic in the window, and the boss has already answered one phone, we literally had at times 7 other phones ringing. Now, this used to drive the big boss up front crazy. But, what could we do? I mean, they're just 3 of us, and they instituted all kinds of different ideas about doing things. Nothing worked. We just irritated people. We even had a funny little thing. We put a numbering system in to help me on the front counter, because people would come in, there'd be 2 or 3 people at the counter already, and just me waiting on them, and they'd go up to our sales department and sit down and talk to a salesman for a half hour, come back and think it was their turn. And, we just asked them, and I'd fit them in whenever I could. And the people that I knew had been there forever, if the next guy in line didn't mind, I would go ahead and get him and take care of him. And I'd say I knew 3/4 of the people that came in there that I waited on. So they knew the situation I was in, and they knew me, and they knew I'd take care of them. But finally, we got some more people in there, and got us. We never did get back up to 5 again, but we did get up to 4. And for the amount of revenue we were generating for the company, 4 people we were just barely able to do what we had done with 5. And there, again, like I said, there were times when there were just 3. Well, when my boss retired, they decided not to hire anybody to replace him. They decided to appoint an overall manager for all 4 stores over the parts department. Well, sounds easy, but unfortunately, that left us with just 3 people there all the time. He could not be there every day. In fact, many times it'd be a week or more would go by and we would never see him. So we had to handle everything. Now, officially, I was never demoted from assistant parts manager, which is also one of the titles I had there. But it was pretty clear that I wasn't his assistant. because he never told me anything, never asked me to do anything, never had me do any part of it. We appointed one of the other guys there to do all the ordering, take care of all the entering. I stayed up on the front counter doing what I do best, continuing to get my commission on sales. And the other guy in the back, the parts, went back to his job, waiting on the back window, and the mechanics, and for doing inventory, working up packages, things like that. And again, we all helped on the phones. Well, there are times when no one was up front. When I wouldn't have any customers, there would be times of day that just nobody would come in. And the phones would not be ringing. And I would attempt to do some of my paperwork, you know, make some callbacks, do some things like that, tidy up my area. By this time, we had gone to all CDs or DVDs, I guess you'd say, would be the right term, and all of our inventory, all of our billing, everything was on computer. But we still maintained a set of books because, as you know, when the power goes out or the hard drive crashes, you can't just stop and tell the customer, sorry, you got to come back. I maintained the old books so that I'd have a backup. And we had a bunch of books. And so I would take a book and go through and repair any torn pages and clean them out, get them in order, you know, relabel them if they needed labels. And there was always little things for me to do that kept me up at the front counter. Well, one of my standing complaints that I always had, and that standing, what I mean by standing complaint, that's with a pun intended. I always felt like I was one of the only people at the company that was not allowed to sit down while I worked. Everybody else either had a stool at their station or they had a desk that they worked from. But because I worked the front counter, and both of the computers that we did our billing with, and the cash drawer and everything was up there, I was required to stay up there and stand at the counter. Now, at one time, we tried to introduce stools for those of us, but the powers that be came by and said it didn't look right, thought it would look like to the customer that we were all just being lazy and, you know, not doing our job and just sitting around goofing off. So the stools were gone. So when it came an opportunity for me to sit down in my long day, I would take that opportunity. Well, this is what rubbed one of the bosses the wrong way. It irritated him to no end, and it seemed like I could be on my feet all day working my butt off, and as soon as I would take one moment to lean on that counter or to sit down in a chair at my desk for just a moment, he would walk by and look at me like I was taking money out of his kid's piggy bank. He wouldn't say anything other than every now and then I'd get a, "Are you caught up on your work? I can find something for you to do if you're caught up on your work." And I would grab another book and get it out and start going through it again, you know, just to have something there so that it at least looked to him like I was doing something. Even though, again, I was the only one on the front counter, the only one there to greet customers that came in the door, primarily there to answer the phone and to take care of everything as far as the displays and everything up front. And I was working my ass off, and when I didn't have customers, I wasn't getting paid. Now, I did get a little small minimum, not really minimum wage, but I got a small weekly wage, hourly wage, that was supposed to help supplement my commissions. But really, the lion's share of my money I made off my commissions. So when I was sitting down, he wasn't losing any money. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't hurting his bottom line at all, but that's just not the way he saw it. So all this up front, so now you know the situation. Well, one day it came to a head. I'm waiting on a customer, and the traveling manager just happens to be in town that day doing some paperwork, in his office, and he comes up to me and he says, when you get through with your customer, I need you to go with me up front. And I'm going, okay, well, I have no idea what the hell's going on. So I finish up with my customer. I grab a pad and pencil, because usually when you get called up there, it's because they have some other brilliant ideas they want you to institute in the parts department. And so got my pad, my pencil, and we went up there and sat down. Well, I go sitting down in there and I start getting read the riot act. I start being told things like, your coworkers hate you. They think you're just goofing off all the time and never doing anything. They really resent that you stay up there and sit at your desk and work on books when they need you to come back there and help them work up an order or something like that. And I responded, and I was shocked. And I responded and I said, well, I'm always available. All they ever had to do was come ask me if they needed help, and I would be glad to come up and help them. And I said, you know, this is the first I've heard of any of this. Nobody said a word to me. And the boss jumped to his feet, leaned over his desk, and pointed his chin at me and said, are you calling me a liar? Well, I was stunned. I worked for this company at this point for 31 years, 32 years. Nobody's ever spoken to me that way at this company. And trust me, there are times when I would have stood up and given it right back to him just as good as I got. But I've gotten a little smarter as I've gotten older and put in time there. And in the back of my mind, I had an idea that maybe this is what he wanted me to do, so that he could fire me for one of the few things the company does fire people for, and that is insubordination. And so I decided not to respond that way. I decided to respond this way. I said, why, no, I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just telling you that no one has ever said anything to me about this. Well, that kind of stunned him that time. And he's kind of hung there. Now he's kind of leaning over the desk, waiting for this big confrontation that I just sidestepped and got out of. And he sat back down in his chair. He didn't say anything for a minute. And he said, we want you to move to one of the other stores. Well, now I'm stunned again. I'm thinking, what? Move to another store? And he said, yes, they need help up at this other store, and we want you to go up there. And I said, is this, do I have a choice in this? And he looked me very carefully in the eye and he said, we want you to go to this other store. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds. And I looked over at the traveling parts manager, and he's looking at me. He ain't said a word this whole time, just sitting there with his hands in his pockets. Now, my old manager would have been there right in there helping me, being on my side. This wasn't the case. So I looked back and I said, can I have the weekend to think about it? And he said, yes, but I need your answer Monday morning. And I said, okay, I can give it to you Monday morning. And I went on back to the parts department, went on back to my job at the counter, waiting on people. Didn't think anything more about it. And that was how it ended that day. Now, to say that I was shocked by all this is to minimize it. I was in cardiac arrest. I mean, literally. I always think of myself as a nice guy. I'm not very confrontational. I get in people's faces, and I don't expect people to get in my face. But I am a salesman. I've had people get in my face before, and I handled it in the only way that I knew that I had any chance at all of coming out ahead. So I went home and talked it over with my lovely wife, and the store that in question was, with traffic, another 30 minutes away added to my drive. That put it about an hour and 15 minutes. With traffic, maybe an hour and a half travel. It's a smaller store dealing in a different product. Still tractors, but a different brand and smaller ones, more lawn and garden than anything else. And she said, well, why not give it a try? You've only got 3 more years before you retire anyway. And I said, okay. I don't really think I have an option. I think he's going to fire me if I don't take it. And I said, she said, okay, well, let's go for it. So I moved to the other store. Absolutely the best experience I had in 35 years. Friendliest, nicest people in the world. Everybody warmly received me. Continued on as a salesman. Because of the difference in product and pricing, I was not able to keep my commission status. I went strictly on the hour, but my pay was adjusted so that I would make the same thing that I'd made the year before, just on salary alone. And I think this may have been a concession that the original owner of the company may have put into it once all of this played out. Because he was a decent fellow, and I really had enjoyed working for him, and he'd been the one who hired me. So, anyway, that's how that worked out. I don't know if you've ever had a boss man get right in your face, and believe me, I wanted so bad to knock all of his teeth out, and trust me, I wouldn't have had any problem doing it. I'm not a big, strong guy, I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover, but by God, my fist would have connected with his teeth in a heartbeat. But I thought about it. Somewhere in my mind, I must have played all this scenario out. And I ended up finally retiring. I've been back to that office many times. I've gone in, said hello, shaken his hand, thanked him for letting me work for the company, and, you know, got my 401k retirement money, and don't have to ever go back there again if I don't want to. So for me, it worked out. I'd be interested in hearing if any of you guys have had any similar run-ins with your boss. Oh well, that's all I need to say. I'm here in Rockmart now, and I'm gonna get on some more roads, and maybe we'll film some of those too. You guys take care. Bye-bye.